start out with Dr. Silver. Could you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry, why you got into the industry, and oh, hi, Irene.
Hey, I'm so sorry.
And what it is that your company does.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, well, my name is Dr. Robert Silver. I'm a veterinarian of 35 years experience. I'm a holistic veterinarian. I got involved in herbal medicine early on in my career, maybe 25 years ago. And I'm a product of the 60s. So when the medical laws were passed in Colorado, I thought it was pretty good, but at the time I really didn't understand the medical aspect of cannabis. And I started having clients coming in with their pets to my exam room, and they were, for cases that I was working on and weren't getting better, and they were magically improving. And I'd ask my clients, well, what's going on? How come Fido's doing so well? And they'd say, oh, doc, we shared some of our stash with Fido, and that's why he's doing so well. So I started doing some research into the world literature and found out that, in fact, there's huge evidence about the medicinal value of cannabis in general. And I've been, for the last 25 years, chief medical officer of a veterinary nutraceutical company, so that I developed a product for this company that also has many other products I've developed, and that was 4 years ago. And since then, we've put over 200,000 bottles in the hands of veterinarians over the past 4 years, and I've learned a lot from their experiences.
Thank you. Dr. Gaynor.
Great. My name is Dr. Jeremy Gaynor. I'm a veterinary anesthesiologist, so I do anesthesia and pain management. And I'm not quite a child of the 60s, but I'm really close. But the way I got interested in is my pain management clinic, which I have not too many people who really do a pain management clinic for animals. But my pain management clinic, I had recently gotten my medical marijuana card for my migraines, and no sooner did that happen than I started having clients come in and say, do you think medical marijuana would be helpful for my dog or cat or whoever it was? And so I started working with some dispensaries so that they would create something that and we didn't have recreational marijuana yet, that they could create something that they could sell to a client who had a medical marijuana card. And so it was a little circuitous of how to treat these animals. At the same time, or very soon, the hemp world started coming online 5 years ago. And I thought, oh, this is my secret, or the answer I need to bring this into my practice. But we started using various products out there, and what we found was a number of things. Sometimes lack of transparency, people wouldn't tell me what was in it. Lack of consistency, well, lack of efficacy, period, and then a lack of consistency where there were products that seemed like they worked, but then we'd order it again for the same dog, and it didn't work. So I got really frustrated. I couldn't quite find the company that was going to meet all my criteria, and so I contacted the Colorado Hemp Farmers Association, like, what do I do? And they kind of gave me some ideas, and so we started this company called Peak Therapeutics, strictly veterinary CBD company. And so I'm like the chief medical officer for Peak Therapeutics and the veterinarian for Peak Performance Veterinary Group. And eventually I have to give up one.
Hi, yes, I'm Charis Fifield. I am the business development manager of Vet CBD, a pet cannabis company in California. And we are a group of veterinary professionals that do, we do have our Vet CBD product, but we primarily are out there educating clients, pet owners, veterinarians on how cannabinoid therapy can really benefit pets. And the reason why I got into this business was, other than I've got 25 years veterinary industry experience myself, being a technician and a hospital director, my own pet had splenic hemangiosarcoma and was given not very long to live, around 3 months to live. And I wanted to go the holistic route. And I was working with a veterinarian who, at that time we heard mumblings of cannabis and how it could help pets. So we decided to put him on a high strain of CBD and some acupuncture, some Chinese herbs, and he lived for 1.5 years. So at that point, I just knew I had a new path and a new mission and goal in life to spread the education and just help more pets.
Irene.
Hi, goodness. Hi, I'm Irene. I own and operate a police canine facility, security canine, Belgian Malinois exclusively, and at this time, I have been working with canines since I was forever young. That was a long time ago. I got my first handler certificate for children under 12. I've worked thousands and thousands of dogs, and obviously I'm on the receiving end of all your benefits. So I wanted to expunge on that, expatiate a bit on that. In New Mexico, where I'm from, it is a little behind. I'm trying to be polite. It's a little behind. And the benefits that I have seen personally with my canines, both breeding females, pups, aging dogs, working dogs, dogs in high-stress environments such as prisons and combat with Department of Defense. I'm talking about Navy SEALs, Rangers, Delta Force. I'm talking about the top end. And law enforcement, SWAT, and canine. It's been remarkable. So, I'm here from a very different point of view, but I think it's helpful for people to see that it's actually valid in a very real way, not as in New Mexico, it's sort of looked at. Even my vet's like, well, you can do that, but I'm not quite sure how, which is obviously why, there's a lot of information to be gathered to pass on. But I'm definitely out as a female in the industry. Anyway, I'm not normal. Now I'm a female in the industry, right? Using the CBD products, I'm definitely out there, but the results are fantastic.
So, we're all talking about veterinarians and how we can take best care of our pets. But from what I understand, the AVMA is not very supportive of this. So, Dr. Gaynor.
Right. Well, so interestingly enough, the AVMA, American Veterinary Medical Association, came out with a position statement paper, basically, in January of 2018. And we were a very young CBD company at the time, but a bunch of veterinarians were sending me emails like, what about this thing that the AVMA is saying? And I hadn't read it yet, but my first response was, who cares? And I say that because the AVMA is a volunteer organization, and their job is to advocate and help the veterinary profession. And so my first response was, I don't care what they say. They have no authority after me. It's not like the state veterinary board. But then I actually read it, and I actually read it a couple times because first time through I thought, oh, this isn't so bad. And really it wasn't so bad. Basically it says marijuana is illegal, okay? They say hemp is not marijuana, and it's illegal for veterinarians to prescribe marijuana. So for me it's like, from a volunteer organization perspective, they just did us a favor opening up the doors. And I think the problem was a lot of veterinarians still are getting the concept, the global concept of medical cannabis confused of medical marijuana versus medical hemp. So I think the AVMA really is pretty much on our side.
Dr. Silver, have you seen any change in the level of awareness with other veterinarians in the last 5 years when it comes to
Well, I think the awareness with veterinarians really has come in the last year since the passage of the second Farm Bill with the removal of the Schedule I status for CBD and anything coming from the hemp plant. But a lot of veterinarians still, as Dr. Gaynor said, confuse hemp with marijuana. It happens commonly. And so that's part of the educational process that we all have to embark upon to share, with our friends and colleagues and not so friendly people. But the big issue I think that veterinarians have is with the FDA, because the DEA is now out of the picture because it's the scheduling, the Controlled Substance Act scheduling of hemp has been removed. But the FDA is taking its time, as it does, to figure out how best to regulate the various different pathways that CBD can take, with the consuming public, whether it's for pharmaceuticals, whether it's for OTC, whether it's for supplements, whether it's for human use in foods, all of these things the FDA is trying to figure out. And they recently had a discovery session where they had like 400 people giving comments over a period of 8 hours. And right now there's companies that are trying to fast track, have the FDA fast-track regulation, because these regulatory agencies and AVMA, Dr. Gaynor's right, it's not a regulatory agency, but they do set standards, practice standards for veterinarians that most veterinarians want to comply with, and these standards then could be looked at by local state veterinary boards in terms of how they enforce things. So the state veterinary boards and the AVMA and other regulatory agencies are waiting for the FDA to tell us, what are the rules? How do we regulate it? How do we ensure that it's safe? Are there certain levels? And what we're looking at right now is that for OTC and for supplement use, we're looking at lower levels of CBD, such as might be found in naturally occurring on the hemp plant, which actually gives us a fairly wide range, because I know there's some hemp cultivars that are coming in with 18 to 20% CBD in their flowers. So, but I think more likely it's going to be closer to like 4%, 5% CBD, which still is quite a bit for an over-the-counter product. So isolated CBD will probably be relegated more to the pharmaceutical realm, and the full spectrum and broad spectrum CBD more likely with animal supplements and human supplements as well. But there's been no enforcement, even though there's all these threats and all these worries. The only enforcements that we're seeing right now have to do with making medical claims and false advertising. And those are appropriate. And although everybody decries regulation, that's the new thing with all the government stuff, I think regulation serves an important purpose in terms of ensuring the safety of products for the consumer. And I support it, not as long as it doesn't get too draconian in its nature.
And I agree with you there. There are a lot of bad players that, and we've all, oh, sorry, something's up here. I'm sure we all have heard stories of products that don't contain what they say.
Well, there's a lot of money to be made in this industry, and I think that's bringing out the bad actors for sure.
So can I interject there?
Yes.
So as a consumer, and as a consumer at sort of very high-end working dogs, that lack of a regulatory perspective is a big concern. Because when I have to give something to my dogs and I can't depend on it, as you mentioned earlier, that is an issue. Because I can't have working dogs getting drowsy on the job. At the same time, there's some toxins in some of these products that are not really screened out in an appropriate way. And dogs have a much smaller weight content and neurological composition. I'm not telling the vets anything they don't know. That the impacts are huge. So for me, in a very niche part of the industry, of my industry, but very high quality, high end, the performance of these dogs is very dependent. The people who purchase these dogs really need them to perform, but the dogs also need your product. So
the consumer deserves quality control.
Right.
Definitely.
And I think that's why probably, at least the three of us and a lot of other people out there who are trying to educate consumers and veterinarians, it's not just about what's the benefit, but it's also currently like, what can you look for to try to get what seems to be a lot of variables there.
Right.
Yeah.
What to look for that gives you a high confidence level that is a good product, since there's no regulation.
So, Chairs, we're talking a lot about hemp, but there's also the THC side.
Yes.
So, and this can be a controversial thing, but there are products that have THC in them as well in legal states.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to touch on that because I think there's some good best practices when it comes to that, and also to make sure that people understand that this is something that you do under the care of a
Right.
professional.
Right.
So can you
Right.
start that discussion?
Yes, yes. THC, I think, is, it's very critical with the dosing, especially when it comes to pets. A lot of these, there are ratios out there, 20 to 1, for instance, 20 parts CBD, 1 part THC for pets, that the THC level is more in microdoses, which is beneficial. THC is a beneficial cannabinoid to have in there. It can help with pain, inflammation, and anxiety, but it is definitely critical with the dosing. And a few years back, probably we didn't have many pet products out there, so a lot of people were using their human either edibles, or they would blow smoke in their pet's face, or try to medicate their pets that way. But it's definitely not the way to do it. THC is and can be toxic at high levels, especially with these human-targeted products. And we also have to look at the things that these products are also made with, especially these edibles usually have chocolate and sweeteners in them as well, which makes it even more so toxic. But THC, that is a big educational pinpoint right there to talk to pet owners. There's still a stigma around it. People are starting to get on board that it can be very therapeutic for their pets, but it is very dosage specific to the pet's weight and condition itself as well.
Doctors, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I agree with everything that she said. I think that THC has a lot of value, and we find that CBD can help to reduce some of the adverse effects of THC. One thing about THC that a lot of people don't know, although many people who use THC themselves probably have discovered, which is that over time, with the use of it, you develop a tolerance to its effects. And so with dogs, one of the ways to be able to get them to use THC, and oftentimes the THC in the 20 to 1 is a fairly small dosage, and if you're really trying to dose, like a cancer patient or something, you need much higher levels, which could be dangerous to use and needs to be done under the supervision of a veterinarian or someone like yourself who's expert in that.
Nope, we're good? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about some indications that you would consider CBD to be a good first choice of treatment.
Okay, I'll start with that.
Okay?
Okay, so I'm going to put the caveat in there first, is that a lot of problems that our pet friends have are not going to be solved with just one product, not one CBD or one pharmaceutical. But I think when we see things that start out low grade, it makes a lot of sense to start out with a non-pharmaceutical preparation. And so as an anesthesiologist and pain management guy, I can tell you there's like CBD with THC, although it's a little dicier in Colorado for pets for that. But CBD as cannabinoids can be really, really beneficial for pain and inflammation related to arthritis, related to back pain. At some point I'll mention about post-operative pain. And, there's lots of indications I'm sure everybody can talk about. But from my perspective, that's really why I developed a CBD product. Like, my interest was pain, inflammation, and we can do a lot with just a CBD product. As it becomes complicated pain, they usually need some other things.
It's nice to be able to start with something that doesn't have a lot of side effects. and that's a great way to start. Cheris, what are some of the things that your product is, that you've seen in your practice with
I would say anxiety is number one. which I was actually really surprised to hear from our pet owners. But anxiety is definitely, I would say, start with a CBD product because it actually works on the anxiety itself. Some prescriptions that are given are mostly sedating. So in the brain itself, it's not really working on the anxiety. It's just kind of knocking them out. And hopefully they won't remember what they're anxious about. But we really want to work on the anxiety and calm the anxiety itself. It's a lot more pleasing for the pet. And again, sometimes medications are in need. As an addition, CBD is another, tool in the toolbox to use.
Irene?
So I have seen with our working dogs, there's a lot of, and I'm sure as veterinarians you've seen this, there's a lot of spinal compression, there are a lot of bone spurs, there are a lot of dislocated discs that result from some of the bite work if the bite work is not done appropriately. There's a lot of these enforcement agencies will use detector dogs up and down on concrete, in and out of vehicles, up and down stairs. And at some agencies, the working life of the dog is 3 years before they have joint issues. It's really hard because they're in and out, and jarring their joints. When I have been able to persuade them to sort of be open-minded and utilize these kinds of products, is it increases the working life of the dog without pain for about 2 years. That's a lot. That's a huge amount. Also, I import a lot of dogs from Eastern Europe, and they always have spinal x-rays. The sport dogs that come in, which are really for my breeding program, and these very high-end, high-working dogs, national champions and so on, every single one of them come in with some kind of spinal injury. And put them on these products, and they are able to, they're without pain. It seems to bring the inflammation down in a significant way. So again, I step outside the box in so many ways, and in the working industry, I barely ever tell anybody this is what I do because, I'm already frowned upon. But it's really awesome. So I can really speak for the efficacy, but what you mentioned in terms of not, sometimes purchasing, and then you purchase again, and it's not the same product, and you're not seeing the same results. And I'm very attuned to these animals. I know them personally, but I've been working with them for so long and so well. I can literally tell just from how a dog looks at me, how much pain it's in. It's not necessarily a structural, physical, clear thing, but it's very clearly communicated if you understand these animals. And I can tell when the product's not working. It's like, this isn't cool. So, very grateful to hear about trying to get a handle on all of that. But also the dosages. The THC, that can be a problem. Mm-hmm. I've literally seen dogs have a psychotropic effect from that, and it's very disorienting. And with the kinds of dogs I work with, they become aggressive. Yeah. They don't just get all mellow. Sometimes they have the adverse response, and it can be alarming. So again, that efficacy sort of control, just as a consumer, is hugely important.
Dr. Silver?
Well, I agree with the use of it for anxiety. It's very good. It stimulates serotonin, which is the vegetative, relaxing neurotransmitter, and I think it's very good for discomfort. But I do differ with Dr. Gaynor in that I really do believe strongly that it's valuable to see a veterinarian for conditions, because oftentimes a layperson is not able to appropriately diagnose that. I had a client who came in that was using CBD for seizures. As she said, it hadn't been diagnosed or observed by a veterinarian, and she wasn't having any success stopping it with the CBD. In the exam room, the dog started having one of the episodes she described, and instead it was something that we call reverse sneezing, which is really where it's kind of an allergic thing where they're kind of sucking snot, so to speak. So I think many times it is valuable and can save you money, although it will cost you money, but it'll save you money to have an expert opinion on that. In Colorado, I don't know how many here are from Colorado, but it's a pretty enlightened state as compared to all the other states of the union in terms of how the veterinarians are responsibly recommending and dispensing cannabinoid therapies.
Now, would you recommend, like, if it's something that somebody really is interested in using cannabinoids for their pet, would it be good for them to call ahead and ask that practice if that's something that they work with, or?
I think that's good advice, because not all veterinarians are on board yet, although in Colorado, many are. So I think it's good, and you can find as we call them, a 420 friendly vet out there somewhere. I'm sure there's more and more of us, every week. I spend a lot of my time traveling and educating veterinarians about the value of cannabis, because someone has to.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. I know in my family, we use CBD with our dog because of his diabetes. It was 3 years ago, and it has, since I started giving him the CBD daily, and I'm working with my veterinarian, and she just keeps going, I don't know about this, but she's good, and she just keeps seeing that the amount of insulin that we have to give him just keeps going down and down and down, and so I'm fortunate to have a veterinarian who will work with me, and I just really think that being able to have a conversation with a veterinarian about, being open and honest about what you want to try to do and what you're doing is just so important for the health of your pet.
Communication's everything.
Yeah, and if the state is saying, no, you can't talk about it, then who's that helping?
I think they do anyway. I've heard in some practices in California, amazingly enough, they have admonished veterinarians not to talk about it at all. So in some practices, they have a workaround where they have the technician walk them out to the car and have the conversation. So it's not in the practice, and the veterinarian's not doing it to risk their license. I think, where there's a will, there's a way. They've let the genie out of the bottle. There's no way to stuff it back in.
Yeah. And Charis, I know that Dr. Shu worked with the state, the government in the state of California.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
that. And so how is that going over there in California?
It's slow. The bill AB 2215 is the bill that passed that allows veterinarians to now be able to discuss, not recommend, but be able to discuss cannabinoid therapy with their pet owners. So it's still, I speak to clients every day, and I see an uptick in people saying, my veterinarian, suggested to, kind of look, or kind of pushed over a pamphlet or something over, like it's a secret drug deal or something, But it's definitely, it's getting more progressive. They're starting to discuss it. They're actually, the veterinarians are starting to go out there and get that education themselves. Dr. Shu, who's the CEO and founder of Vet CBD, also, the veterinarian, he also gives presentations to the veterinary industry to, just to get them on board and just to get that education out there so that they can have that discussion with pet owners that want to try it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of education, what we need more of to be able to provide the education is studies. So I want to talk about recent studies that have come out, about studies that you may be participating in or sponsoring. Let's talk about science. Doctor?
I don't know why I got that, but maybe, actually. So the good news is and Dr. Silver already said this, there's a huge amount of data on the human side, and tons that's being generated, every day, every week, every month. There's a much smaller amount of data on the animal side, on the companion animal side. Now, there's lots of rodent stuff going on, but that's just kind of preclinical. But we now have data, we have some pharmacokinetic data, which really talks about if an animal takes this orally, like how much really ends up in their bloodstream, which is really important. And that's really, we were just talking right before this, it's really an important component for every single product, but it's not out there yet. But at least we know in general, you give an oil formulation, a dog can absorb it, they have what appears to be some reasonable blood levels. There's osteoarthritis data out there now. There's seizure data out there now. And a lot of times these companies are combining these outcome studies with blood level studies so that you can really attribute a certain effect to a certain blood level. Now, in the real drug world, that doesn't always correlate, but it looks like it's probably going to correlate in the CBD world. So the good news is there's lots going on. I think Dr. Silver has a study that he can talk about that they're going to do or start. We have a study going on just south of Denver, efficacy study for osteoarthritis, because that's the most common source of pain, long-term pain in dogs and cats. So we have a study going on that's got, a double-blinded, placebo-controlled study, so it's a real study that you'll be able to believe in. It's got computerized gait analysis, so there's an objective component. So a lot of us, and us being people in the CBD world, are really trying to generate more data to give people more confidence.
May I ask a question? What animals are you utilizing for that study?
So these are clinically effective medium to large breed dogs with we're really isolating it to make it easier to do a data analysis. So they're all dogs with hip problems.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because in the dog world, the elbow is the most difficult joint to get comfortable. So if you combine an elbow study with a hip study and you don't get something that looks really good, it could just be because there were too many elbows in the study. Now, if you can show it works for elbows, it's going to work for anything, probably.
Right. Right.
Elbows are more difficult to treat than hips.
Right.
And knees. So I developed a product that has 0 THC in it. That makes it broad spectrum. For many of the same reasons that Eileen was concerned about the CBD, the THC in products and its idiosyncratic adverse effect on dogs. But there's a lot of spin in the industry. There's a lot of urban myths about you need to have THC to activate CBD. A product's not going to work without THC. I've heard you need THC for CBD to be absorbed. All kinds of stuff for which there's no scientific substantiation. So I felt it was very important, especially since the primary customer of these products is veterinarians, that we do both a pharmacokinetic study, PK study, like Dr. Gaynor said, to show that we get substantial blood levels with a standard dosage, and then to do an efficacy study. So I'm in the process, I've completed the PK study, and I'm in the process of recruiting dogs that have arthritis for the efficacy study that we're going to do in Austin with measuring techniques that will be objective in nature. The one arthritis study that's been published comes from Cornell, and they had good success. They used a really high dosage of 2 mg per kilogram twice daily, which is like a milligram per pound 2 times a day. When we're finding a 1/4 milligram per pound 2 times a day to a 1/2 milligram per pound 2 times a day seems to work for most levels of pain. They had success, but they didn't do anything that objectively measured the improvement. They were all surveys. So I want to do one better, and hopefully you will too. Being CSU grads, we'd like to show Cornell a thing or two, So we're working on that, and there's a lot of good information. For instance, with the epilepsy study, CSU was looking not just at plain old epilepsy, garden variety epilepsy, but what we call refractory epilepsy, which is where the patient may be on 3 different really strong anticonvulsant drugs and be a walking zombie and still have seizures. It's a tragedy. So we're trying to see if we're hopeful CBD will work just as it did with Charlotte Figge, and that whole thing. So we're hopeful, with the new Epidiolex, FDA-approved product for pediatric epilepsy. We're hopeful we can find an avenue that will help these dogs with refractory epilepsy too.
So I wanted to bring attention to something that you said. You were talking about the dosing, and the Cornell had 1 milligram.
2 mg per kg.
2 mg per kg, and
1 mg per pound.
And we're finding that significantly lower. It has effects. So I don't think that everybody understands the whole biphasic thing. So where more is not necessarily better. Because in my world, more cheesecake is always better than a small amount of cheesecake. So can you explain how you can actually get a better result using a lower amount?
You should do that now.
There you go, yeah.
Okay, it's a bit complicated, but the reason is that there's receptors in the body that receive molecules that the body produces called endocannabinoids, and these molecules, just by the sheerest of accident, these plant molecules actually bind to these receptors in one way or another. And so, because these receptors are involved, when you have an overabundance of one of these plant molecules, it can adversely affect the body's own system. Whereas if you have a smaller amount, it works what we call physiologically with the body's system and enhances the body's own healing processes instead of kind of, clogging them up with too much stuff. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect, yeah.
Right. So in defense of the Cornell study, and I only and I'm not saying I agree with it, but because it was sponsored by a drug or a manufacturer as opposed to just being a science study, manufacturers, drug companies, no matter what you're looking at, typically choose what they think is going to be the higher end of the product to show maximal efficacy.
And also safety.
Right.
And they used isolate instead of using a full spectrum or broad spectrum. And we know from studies that isolate is like a 99% pure CBD. They referenced rodent studies using isolate for their starting dosage versus asking me what was working.
Right, and me too. But so what's interesting is there's all different kinds of ways to dose a CBD product. And I used to really go by the dogma, not to have a pun, but no pun intended, of starting low and working your way up. Now, there's some validity to that, but what I found with a lot of pet owners is if you start low and it takes time to get an effect, no matter how much you describe that to them, sometimes they get very frustrated that maybe this product doesn't really work. So what I talk to people about is like what we think is the range of dosing, like maybe 1/4 to 2 milligrams per kilogram. I say, let's start at 1 milligram per kilogram, and in a certain amount of time, and this is whether we're talking about seizures, anxiety, pain, back problems, in a certain amount of time, if you have seen the effect, now let's work our way down to the lowest effective dose, and in a certain amount of time, if you haven't seen the effect, let's systematically work our way up. And I'm an anesthesiologist, so everything is systematic for me.
Well, and Dr. Gaynor and I have discussed this in the past because I'm one of those guys, start low, go slow, gradually work your way up. But I have to say that having thought about considering what he said, I think there's a lot of legitimacy to that approach as well.
I'm a bolus girl myself. I'm gonna hit them hard and then go from there. So, a lot easier when you're human though, because you can actually talk and say, hey, this is working, this isn't working. And so, because of that, I'd like to talk about some adverse effects that you might see with, like what happens if your dog or your cat or whichever animal is getting a little bit much, or, if they would benefit from a lower dose. What are some things that a pet parent might be able to recognize?
You should start since you're THC.
Right. I think that, is more so for the THC part. With the THC, if your pet does ingest high THC levels, they'll become unstable. They'll have low blood pressure, possibly become ataxic, and it's extremely uncomfortable for them. They don't know what's going on, and I'm sure it's terrifying if you can, think if you were drugged and you didn't know it. If it's, I've not heard of any deaths from THC, although I know that there has been a death from aspiration due to the effects of ingesting the THC.
And so if a pet does somehow ingest THC and starts being symptomatic,
Yes.
just get them to the animal hospital.
Just get them to the animal hospital. Yeah.
Don't try to,
No, don't, yeah, just take him to your veterinarian. And be honest, you know, especially these days. We just want to, you know, make sure that the pet's taken care of. When I was working hospitals, you knew it was a THC toxicity, yet the person just would not, they just would not tell you
they
the
want to
honest
protect
truth.
themselves and not their animal.
Exactly, exactly.
So, just to follow with that, on the toxicity side of THC, in a case series that was put together by Colorado State University, hundreds of dogs and cats basically who had gotten into somebody's marijuana, and I think it was like 247 in the report. There were 2 deaths, but they were all attributed to co-intoxication, chocolate,
Right.
because they're eating edibles mainly. But other than that, like the side effects of THC are annoying, scary, but like it would be highly, highly unlikely to kill an animal. The proposed toxic dose is 9,000 milligrams per kilogram of body weight.
Right.
So no one's ever seen true toxicity. In fact, a number of pharmacologists are now referring to what we call marijuana toxicity more as just marijuana side effects.
Or
Because-
overdose.
Right, well, but because it's not really hurting them, they're just doing something that is unpleasant. From a full spectrum CBD extraction perspective, we see very, very few side effects. Every now and then, like maybe 1 or 2 a year that actually come to my attention, are dogs who get really drowsy. And, you know, I don't know, like we don't have a zero THC product, but it's so small, it's hard to imagine. So, you know, it would be a misnomer to say that CBD does not have a psychotropic effect because it can affect anxiety and sleep and seizures. So I think some dogs are just really sensitive. I think the biggest thing we find, if a dog gets like 30 milliliters of an MCT, basically coconut oil-based product, sometimes they get some loose stool.
Yeah.
That's like the worst of it for us.
Yeah, and it's about the, it's like, well, it's the oil, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the worst of it for
Yeah,
you.
because it tends to be the oil, because for a lot of reasons, CBD may be good for a number of gastrointestinal problems.
It may also stimulate gut peristalsis, though.
So I was just going to make a gnarly joke, so it's the worst of it for you, but we have to do the cleanup.
I mean, what have you seen with your animals that, and other than you had said with the THC that you had seen
Right.
some aggression?
Right.
Because you've got a confused
Well,
animal
you've got
that
a
is trained to, you know, in a security kind of
Environment,
fashion, too. Yeah.
correct, right. So definitely that is something that we watch out for, because when the dogs are disoriented, they go to their most feral state, with, you know, which has been highlighted in their training, which is protection. So obviously that becomes an issue. If you're on the receiving end of that, I would rather have the loose stool than the, you know, than the blood that is now coming out of other people's body parts. Not so cool. I've really not, other than that, I've seen dogs get quite drowsy, and obviously that's an issue. I've seen some dogs actually lose their balance a little bit. I've seen that happen where they haven't. So I'm a great proponent of the start low and go high, just because I work with such a vast spectrum of animal, and when it goes wrong, it can go wrong in a quite a negative way for us. Again, I'm in a very niche part of the animal world, which is why I asked you, you know, what animals you were conducting a study on. But the benefits have been astonishing. They've just been amazing, and I'm a huge proponent. It's difficult for me to get product. It's not illegal, but I don't have really good product dependability yet, so that's something I'd obviously be talking to you guys about. And with regards to the studies, I've actually, done my own little thing because I love science, I have a PhD in human psychology, so I'm a little bit different in a lot of ways. So I've seen how these dogs perform both with it and without it over a 6-week to 8-week period to see what the difference is. And it's the mobility of the animal is significant, and the proaction of the animal is significant. So, I have these vets to thank for all the work that they're doing.
And we do want to thank all of our panel members. Unfortunately, we are.
Well.
So thank you so much for your contributions and for sharing your knowledge with our audience. And I am sure that these members.
Thank you. Well, if you have